Okay, so we're picking up here with things that affect the strength of influence attempts. Peer pressure tends to increase influence with numbers up to 4 peers, but then it levels off. So 1, 2, 3, 4, but then it plateaus there, right? So no greater benefit from 5. Now, closely related is consensus. The presence of just one dissenting ally can make a big difference. It's much easier to stand up for what you believe in with even just one ally than it is to stand alone. In Ash's follow-up study, a single ally decreased conformity by 80%, even if the ally didn't give the correct answer, just gave a different, incorrect answer. In other words, went against the crowd. Now, in a really cool archival study, out of over 400 decisions handed down on the Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court, from 1953 to 2001, the least common vote was 8-1. And that would be ones involving a single lone dissenter, right? Now, perceived norms. Influence is greater if compliance is perceived to be the norm. In one creative study we'll call the cigarette butt study, a "Please do not litter" sign was placed in an outdoor smoking area. Now, researchers varied whether the ground was clear of cigarette butts or littered with them. Then they counted the butts in the former case and the additional butts in the latter case. Compliance with the sign was significantly decreased when the perceived norm was littering. In other words, people were more likely to litter themselves when it was clear that others were doing so. Perceived norms. In another very creative study, the windshield flyer study, flyers were left under the windshield wipers of cars in 2 parking garages, one with floors that were cluttered with other litter and one where the floors were clean. People were far more likely to toss a flyer to the ground in the littered garage when they got to their car. Pretty creative methodology. We often run across that in social psychology. Now, appealing sources also increase influence, and there are many factors that affect the source's appeal. An attractive source is more likely to influence. It is not a coincidence that the Moonies assigned 3 young, exceptionally attractive women to Hassan's campus to approach young men, and then to hang out with him at their events. We are also more likely to be influenced by sources who are similar to us, similar in race, beliefs, values, lifestyles, etc. Henry Fonda's character in the classic film 12 Angry Men would have been significantly less likely to turn such a uniformly white jury around, for instance, if he had not also been white. People with charismatic styles also more likely to influence others. These are people who are high in interpersonal skills, who appear confident, likable, trustworthy, personable, and are skilled communicators. And finally, sources who are perceived to be authorities on the subject matter at hand are more likely to influence others. Your car mechanic is more likely to convince you to change your air filter than your hairdresser. Well, your hairdresser is more likely to convince you to switch shampoos. Remember Milgram's famous obedience study? Milgram moved from Yale University to an office in a dilapidated downtown building to run it again, thus signaling a real lack of authority. Obedience dropped to 48% from 65%. Still 48% though. Apparently a white lab coat and clipboard are enough for some people to infer authority. Okay, so we have covered 5 different factors that increase influence. Now we're going to look at some factors that can decrease it. When people are motivated to be accurate, They are more subject to informational influence, but less subject to normative influence. Now, remember, informational influence is when the situation is vague, is ambiguous, and we don't know the answer. We look to others for what to do. Normative influence is when the correct answer is clear, but we conform just to go along with the crowd. When people, again, are motivated to be accurate, they are more subject to informational influence, but less subject to normative influence. Would you predict more or less influence with Sharif's pinpoint light participants if they were offered $20 for an accurate guess? And the answer is more. Yes, accuracy motivation increases informational influence. And Sharif's pinpoint light study, remember, was an example of informational influence. Now, would you predict more or less influence for Ash's participants, Ash's, if they were given a financial motivation to be accurate? And the answer is less. Yes, accuracy motivation decreases normative influence. And Ash's study is a great example of normative influence. Finally, this is one of my favorite. Prior knowledge can decrease social influence in a couple of ways. Now, in medicine, injecting a small dose of an infection stimulates the body to develop antibodies against it, right? Likewise, in social psychology, the inoculation effect is forewarning a person, exposing them to weak doses of the opposing position beforehand. This induces them and gives them time to come up with counterarguments before they are exposed to the message themselves, which helps to build resistance. The inoculation effect. Also, education about social influence techniques makes one more vigilant and likely to identify and resist such techniques when they are used in a potentially harmful way. Knowledge is power.